Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gassabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life. Hello, and welcome back. You are listening to Whispers to a Bride. I am Kara, and today we are talking about My Fiancé Is Over It. So before I jump in, I just want to encourage you, as we are revving up for our 100th episode, I'm going to be doing some giveaways. And in order to enter, all you have to do is jump on in to that rate and review section. If you're on YouTube, you can rate and review. If you are on Apple, Spotify, just rate and review this podcast for me. It helps other brides find it. And that's what we want to do is if this podcast has been helpful to you, you want to just do the good thing and pay it forward. And you'll also be entered in the giveaway. And then also, I am not going to put ads on this podcast, right? There's so many podcasts that have ads and there's lots of reasons to do that. But I want to keep ours like really brief and tight and straight to the point. And another way that I'll be able to do this without doing ads is by getting those ratings and reviews. So if that could be the one thing you do for me and I will keep this ad free, we'll all be happy. So thank you so much. And I love you guys. And let's dive in to the episode. So this episode is based on a question that I got on socials, probably TikTok. And it says, how do you deal with a super stressed out partner who says they can't wait for the wedding planning to be over? So this particular bride was pretty offended that her fiance said, like, I can't wait for this to be over. I like to think of this sentiment. First of all, it's definitely not rare or unique. This happens to a lot of couples. And I like to remind brides, like, this is like a good news, bad news thing. First, the good news. Your fiance is probably saying that they cannot wait for this wedding to be over because they want to spend more time with you. They want to get back to ordinary times where you just go to work, come home, make dinner, hang out, watch Netflix, chat about what you're going to do that weekend. Like they want to get back into ordinary life when you're not talking about vendors and guest lists and spreadsheets and colors and tables and vendors and all those things that really sort of like clutter up your free time when you are in the wedding planning mode. So I often try to remind brides that this is often a really good sign. Your fiance is over the whole like hoopla and really excited about the actual marriage and spending time with you. And that is a good, sweet thing. Now, the bad news can be that this feeling of being really offended that your fiance is over it usually means there's a disconnect, right? Maybe the disconnect is that how can he be saying he's over it when he's barely done anything? So you're feeling sort of like you've been carrying the burden of a lot of the planning and now suddenly he's the one who's over it and can't wait for it to be done. You're like, whoa, that is not even a feeling that like I even understand how you got there. So you could feel very disconnected in that way. Or you could feel like you put so much of your identity and your happiness and your style and your excitement and just a lot of yourself on the line for this big day and all the planning and hard work you've put into it. You're really proud of and you care about, you're invested in it. So for him to be sort of dismissive and just sort of be like, oh, I can't wait till it's over can feel just kind of insulting. Like, do you not value everything that I put in and everything that this means to me? So I like to just unpack that bad news part, that it's just an invitation to exploring like, okay, what's going on here? You can be offended and just sort of like stomp off and think that it's rude, or you can lean in. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Because if you know me, you know by now that I really believe all the things that we see pop up during our wedding planning are there to show us what we're going to be dealing with in our marriage. So for him to say a comment like that and you to be offended this can be a dynamic that we're going to have a lot. So let's get good at it and let's figure out how to do it with more ease and more grace and with more respect for one another. So I would encourage, if you are going through this with your fiance, just to simply ask why, right? Before you fill in the blanks about what you think is the reason that he's over it and why, like what your brain is going to project onto the situation, simply sit back and ask why. And that's when you might get some of that information that, like, maybe he's just done with the chaos. Maybe he's done with all the different opinions and people talking at them and coming at them. Maybe he's just nervous about being sort of on socially for that day and he just can't wait for that to be finished because he's more of an introvert and big parties and settings like this are not his favorite thing. Maybe he's just really excited to be married and take on that identity. Like, who knows what? But let's ask why. Maybe it's that he's really stressed about the money and he feels like you guys have blown the budget and now he just really wants to, like, sort of stop the bleeding and, like, get through this day and then start to build towards whatever other financial goals you might have. Maybe he's got some pain about family members who are not showing up for him and he's hurt by, or friends who aren't available to celebrate with him. And so he just wants, like, who knows? But the important question is to ask why. Because instead of just being reactive and insulted, we're going to get curious and we're going to lean in and we're going to trust that there's a reason that your partner's over it and it's probably not all bad and that it's worth knowing about, because this might be something that will help you going forward in your marriage as you approach other, like, holidays or celebrations or big financial expenditures or time with family or how to celebrate with friends. Like, all of those themes will come up again, not in the one big crazy way that a wedding will bring it, but they will come up sort of individually around, other celebrations that are going to come in your marriage. And so it's really good to sort of figure that out. It can also be that maybe he's just, like, doesn't like seeing you so preoccupied or so stressed or so freaked out or distracted. And maybe he's just feeling like, I just want your attention back and your focus back. When it's not all about the wedding, it can be more directed at him. That is a very common reason for someone to be over it. So I just, again, encourage, before you get offended and before you get upset, just ask why and learn more and trust that the reasons are probably a mix. And then also, I would recommend, if you guys are up for it, I think some couples would be more sort of open and interested in this idea than others. I find that doing a planning post-mortem little conversation, it could be a date night, where you just really sit down before the wedding, like in that last month, when most of the planning is, like, done, but it isn't the wedding yet. There's that nice little, like, it's the period that I like to call the surrender period, where we're just like, okay, the decisions are made, the plans are down. Like, now we just gotta, like, surrender to what happens and be available for what happens and be open to what happens. And so I feel like having this little postmortem where you just look at the planning process, right? We're not evaluating our wedding that hasn't happened yet. We're just looking at the planning process. And you could talk about, like, gosh, what was really terrible? What did you hate the most? What were you really into? What were you really good at? What were you most impressed by your partner? Like, wow, I love the way you really included my family and really researched, like, our culture and the traditions that would help make them feel included. Or I love the way you kept that budget really tight so we didn't get ourselves into a financial hole that we would regret. Or just, I love how involved you were in every conversation or every decision. Or on the contrary, what if you're like, I love how you just, like, gave me full reign to do what I wanted to do and make the style choices. I just think that, like, talking about the way in which you guys approached the planning process together can be really helpful and useful and give a lot of nice closure to that season, because the planning season is its own little chapter that has all these nuggets that are going to be so useful to you in your marriage. And it's nice to just put a little separation between that analysis and not lumping it in with the day itself, because the day itself has its own sort of, like, magic and mystery and its own just, like, whole story that's really very separate from the planning. And I find that if you don't stop and look back until after the wedding, you can kind of clump some of the, like, parts that maybe you hated about the planning into the wedding day itself. And I think it's just nice to keep those two things separate, right? They're just really different and have really different things to be gleaned and learned from. So, yeah, I think if you are facing a fiance who is just over it and you're feeling a little like not so cool, a little offended, a little like bristled by that reaction, most important question is just ask why with openness and curiosity. And second, maybe try to sneak in this little conversation or be very overt about it, whatever you think is more palatable to your partner and whatever feels good to you. Just let's talk about it. Let's look at this planning process and like, wow, look how far we've come. Be proud of each other, but also point out the things that like, wow, this was really hard. I realized that like we do not talk well about money, or we do not talk well about my family, or we do not do well with like caring about my friends as much as your friends, or whatever it is. Take a moment to try to do a little of this planning postmortem. I think it can just be really, really useful, and also can let some of those maybe icky feelings or unspoken hurts or disappointments, just let those go so that we can go into the wedding day a little lighter, a little brighter, a little cleaner, like clean slate, just like ready to bring a new restored energy to the actual day. I just think you both deserve that. And I think this planning postmortem is the best way to do it. So, as always, I am available to chat with you one on one to tackle whatever you are going through in this season of your life. It is the most problematic, but also the most profound time to really just give yourself the luxury of a little perspective, a little insight, and partnering with a professional like myself is like the best way to really hear and figure out what is going on with you and how you can trust your own instincts and solve your own problems and make your relationships deeper and more meaningful and make your life just better. That's the whole point. So you can find me at karamaureen.com, and you can find me on TikTok and Instagram, Kara the Bridal Coach. And until next time, I am wishing you nothing but bridal bliss.